All right, we are about 2 minutes after the top of the hour, so we'll get started with our webinar, and we'll record for people who join a little bit late. So welcome to our webinar on how to implement our permit to work capability within health and safety. This is a new feature that we released in our January 2025 release, so we're excited to share some tips and tricks on how to get started with an implementation of this feature. Before we get into our content today, I'd love to introduce our two speakers. We also have a third member of our team who's joined us for our session today, and he'll be here to monitor our chat. But I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Claire Russell. I'm the lead outbound product manager for health and safety. I'm joined here today with Shana Smallwood. He is one of our inbound product managers for health and safety. And on our call, we also have Jordan Thompson, who is one of our other inbound product managers for health and safety. So we're very excited to have you join us. We have a lot of expertise with this product, so feel free to ask all your questions. We'd love to hear from you today. From a housekeeping perspective, this session is being recorded. And it will be posted on our health and safety community page. So all of our documentation, all of our blogs, our webinars, we post on our community page. So if you need to find this session afterwards, share it with someone on your team, or if you do need to drop off, you'll be able to watch the rest of this session or rewatch. During our session today, ask questions in the chat. We will answer as we go, and there's going to be a dedicated time at the end to ask questions. In this format, there's the chat. There's also the Q&A, so you can put them in either place. We'll answer them as we're going through our presentation. And then also, we at the end, when we have our Q&A section, you can also come off mute. We can take you off mute if you need to ask any questions while off mute. So lots of opportunity to ask us questions here. And then want more. For any additional information, visit our docs page and our community page as well. That is where you'll find the information or more information on how to get started with our permit to work feature. So from an agenda standpoint today, we'll have a busy hour, and we're going to first walk through an overview of permit to work. So what is permit to work from a business perspective, what we've released from a feature and a product perspective, and then I'll pass it over to Shana, and he's actually going to walk through a demo of permit to work, and that's really going to tie it together if you haven't seen our permit to work product yet. We'll then start getting into more of the technical considerations of what you'd be looking at during implementation. So what is the architecture of and data model of the feature, as well as any additional tips and tricks and considerations as you're going through your implementation process. If you're new to health and safety, or you're a bit familiar with health and safety, I want to start off with an overview of what actually is in our product. So health and safety is a store-based application. We have 6 plugins that are available on the store. If you type in the names at the top here, you'll find our plugins. And what we've done is with our plugins, we've released our permit to work feature within our risk management plugin. So that is the feature that we're covering today, but I do like to start off with this slide to show additional features within health and safety. If you're exploring or just getting started with health and safety, this really gives you an understanding of what we've released and what we've, is available for you. We'll talk about some of these other features today, particularly in risk management. So this also gives a good understanding and sets some context. So we have our incident management plugin that we first released. We then released our risk management plugin, and then we have some of our additional, plugins here. On our community page, we have webinars on these features and these plugins, and you'll be able to find them in our What's New webinar if you are curious about learning more about these. So as we're starting off our permit to work webinar, your first question might be, if you're maybe on the IT side, or you're a platform owner, or maybe you're from a partner, what is permit to work and what is this workflow essentially that we're talking about today? So, permit to work is a process that is there to ensure that high risk and hazardous work is done safely, and the goal is to reduce incident rates. So, it is a process that is managed by health and safety teams, operations teams to make sure that when an employee is doing any type of very high risk or hazardous work, they're doing it safely. The goal is to confirm that workers are aware of any hazards that are associated with the work and that there have been safety measures that have been put into place before the work has been started so that they don't start the work until we know the conditions are safe. There's measures that have been put in place that are protecting employees from any potential risks that might happen as they're conducting that work. Permit to work is pretty regulated, so there are going to be safety regulations depending on where your customer is and depending on where you are. So if you're in the US, there's some recommendations and regulations from OSHA. If you're in Australia, Safe Work has recommendations and regulations. And so it is going to depend on your industry as well as where you are in the world. And also internal policy. Often your internal policy is going to dictate what are the conditions that determine, what is safe to start work. And so that's going to inform the standards for the safety measures required for work to start. So unless these have been met, work cannot begin because it is not safe for the employee. We're going to look at the permit to work request. So permit to work is the end-to-end workflow of this request process and essentially starting work, maintaining the conditions during the work, and then also, finishing the work and any additional things that need to happen there. But it is going to be started by a permit to work request. So that request, and we're going to take a look at that in our demo today, is going to contain information about what is the work, the scope of it, who is involved in the work, when is it occurring, information specific to the permit type, so what type of hazardous work, any safety measures that are put in place before this work begins and during the work, and any actions that are there to mitigate the risk. And then finally, at the end in the permit to work process, there's always going to be an authorization of work, and that's going to be conditional. So if any of these conditions change, the work can be stopped or paused. And we'll walk through an example of that. But with this permit to work process, there is always going to be an approval or an authorization to tell the employee, yes, you can start work. But if the safety measures change, if any of the environmental conditions change, then there might be a pause or stop on that work. So some examples of permit to work types. I think I called out that on the permit to work request, there's going to be a categorization or a type of that specific permit. And these are to categorize that type of high risk work being done. And they're going to have corresponding safety procedures and information on that request that are required to be collected. So Shana will walk through during his demo the options that we have for out of the box permit to work requests and some of the information that's needed to be collected for that permit type. And every permit to work request can have multiple permit types depending on the work being done. So for example, I have a worker here. He's working in a he or she is working in a confined space welding. So it's hot work in a confined space. So again, it's going to depend on the type of work that the employee is doing, but oftentimes they would have had to submit multiple permits, one for maybe hot work, one for confined space entry. So when we were building this, we wanted to make sure that they can put multiple types on one permit so that they don't have to go through the process twice. So these are the types of permit types that we provide out of the box, but your customers have the ability to add additional types as needed, and we'll walk through that actually later of how you can configure additional types. I know underwater welding, for example, or underwater is an example of a type that we don't have here, but depending on your customer's industry, they might need to add that. So this is our workflow of permit to work, and this is a pretty high level workflow. I think depending on your own requirements or your customer's requirements, there might be additional steps. There might be, approvals or notifications added to this. But I wanted to situate us in what is the overall flow of the permit to work journey. So initially, this is going to start off with your EHS team, and they're going to perform a risk assessment on the job. So they maybe are notified of a new job or they know of the job, and this is a specific project. So maybe a couple of employees have been tasked out to go to a job field site to begin building a new building, for example. On there, they know that some of the work that needs to be done is hazardous. And so they're going to do a risk assessment to determine what are the hazards that are present, what controls need to be put in place, and also determine how hazardous that work is. So the AHS team is going to do that risk assessment, often within health and safety risk management, and they're going to determine that this job does require a permit to begin. So from there, within the process, that is now going to go to employees. So when employees get tasked to do that work, so whether it be through an email notification, maybe they've been tasked through a workplace service delivery case or an FSM work order, they now know that they need to start work. And the first step that they need to do is to submit the permit to work request. So on this request, it's going to document all of the information about the work. It's going to document the hazards, the safety measures taken, and any additional information that's required within that permit to work request. Next, that's going to go to the permit coordinator, and they're going to review the request. They're going to verify that all the safety measures are in place and that work can start. So this is now the approval process of that permit request. Again, that approval is going to be conditional. So if any conditions change on that initial submission, the worker or the manager needs to let the permit coordinator know, or the operational manager know that conditions have changed. So the permit coordinator, if everything looks good to start, will issue that authorization to begin work. And oftentimes, and I don't have it on this slide because this is more of the workflow, the manager or the employee is going to print out that permit and put it at their job site. And they're going to do that in case there's an inspection or an external inspection or an audit that takes place. Maybe OSHA will stop by and say, where's your permit? The reason that we have printing capability is a lot of times they will not want to bring their phone out or take out their phone to show that. They want to make sure that it's there so that they don't get a fine or written up on that. So Shannon will show some of our printing capabilities as well. So next, after that, our employee will start work. They're going to carry out that work safely. Management or their manager is going to oversee that it's being, carried out safely, and they'll report any changing conditions. Again, it's going to be conditional. So say, for example, they start work that day, they're working at height. So they're up on a ladder, they have their PPE, so they're, clipped in, they're, working safely, but say it's very windy that day and there's hazardous conditions. So as they're working at height, it's too windy to continue work. So they will pause the permit and the work essentially until the conditions change. So that's just an example of how external factors or anything can change the conditions that the permit has been accepted on. So it could either be paused or stopped. We have 3 user personas here. Again, this is really simplifying it so you understand each of our users in their day-to-day and how they're interacting with health and safety. But again, depending on your customer's complexity or their requirements, they might have additional user personas, which we are flexible enough to have those dedicated roles for them and configure some of those roles. But at first we have our employee here. They're going to kick off that permit to work request process. They're going to be the ones doing the work. So we want them to safely carry out that high risk work and follow safety procedures. And then they're also going to report any changing safety conditions. Another example is for confined space work. OSHA actually requires, I'm in the US, so a lot of my examples are OSHA specific, but again, every country is going to have different regulatory requirements for permits. But for OSHA, they require that for a confined space, if you're working in a confined space, to actually have someone at the entry, just making sure that if you pass out, they can get help. So say, for example, that employee that has been tasked to stand outside that confined space to just make sure that you're okay while you're doing your work is sick for that day. That is just an example of something that would need to be reported as a changing condition. The operations manager needs to oversee work conditions to ensure that work is being conducted safely and efficiently, and also stop or pause the work if those conditions change. We also have our permit coordinator role. That is a ServiceNow term, but you can, give that role to maybe managers or someone, on the EHS team if that is, aligned to your customers' internal process for overseeing and who is approving essentially and managing those permit requests. And then we have our EHS team here. They're going to oversee the entire risk management process. So with permit to work, there's a lot of safety process that needs to be followed. So things like um, risk assessments, inspections, and JSAs, and they're going to be monitoring those and essentially implementing those process to reduce the amount of hazard or risk as they're doing this permit to workflow. So now we get to what we've released in terms of our products. So that just situates you to understand a little bit more about permit to work from the business standpoint and what some of the requirements are. But now we're getting into permit to work and essentially what we've delivered in terms of the feature. So permit to work is a feature, again, that lives within our risk management capability. The goal of it is to efficiently control real-time risks and streamline the permit to work process. So with our feature, you'll be able to control risk, oversee any hazardous work that's going on. So you'll have visibility into all of the submitted permit to work requests. You can maintain regulatory compliance for process safety standards. So if there's new information that needs to be collected on the permit to work request, you'll be able to configure that. And we'll walk through how you can do those configurations today. You'll be able to maintain the dynamic forms. Again, every permit type is going to require different information to be collected, so you can add different fields to that. And it will also empower organizations to scale the safety process. So with this, it's digital, it's accessible from their employee center, their mobile phone. So they'll be able to easily and efficiently access this permit to work. And for your safety teams and for your platform or IT teams, they'll be able to help make those changes quickly and easily. And then it's intuitive. The biggest feedback that we've heard is to make sure that it's a consistent and easy to use experience for employees. We want to make sure that as they're going through this process, they know they're guided along, they can submit all of the information, and that's going to make it a more efficient process and eliminate some of that back and forth of missed documentation and skipping things as they're submitting it. So we want to make sure that it's completely easy for them to use on their end, update, receive notifications, and it's a positive experience for them to do this process. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Shayna to give a demo of our permit to work process.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just share my screen and hopefully you guys can see it now.
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. Okay, so let's have a quick look at requesting first a permit to work, and then we'll jump into the workspace side of things to see how the permit coordinator would review and manage those permits from the workspace. So what we're looking at now is the health and safety page within Employee Center. And what we've done is we have added the ability to request a permit from any one of the, from this page down here. So you can click here, you can click to request a permit to work. And we've also added to the menu up here, we've added the permit to work topic where you can jump in to also request a permit to work. So what I'll do right now is I'll jump into my requests as I actually started a request earlier on, and I saved it as a draft. So we do have the new platform draft capability where if you need to request a permit to work, or a lot of other records have this feature as well, you can start filling in the details, save it as a draft, and then return later to fill in the rest of it. So this is the request a permit to work page that a user would see when they need to request a permit. Right at the very top, we can choose the type of work that this permit needs to cover. So I know that some permit to work systems, you would need to request separate permits for each of these types of work. But in this case, you can choose as many as you need. So at the moment for this one, we're doing confined space and we're doing hot works. But you can add as many as you need from the list of the out of box work types. These are configurable. So you can add additional ones. You could disable the ones that we provide out of the box, or you could even configure any of these existing out of the box work types to choose what fields will show up on the permit. What we're looking at the moment are the high level items related to this permit, including some of the related artifacts such as risk assessments, job safety analysis, anything from maybe your chemicals or asbestos registers. We can also do things like associated inspections and work tasks. Um, these can all be configured as well. So if you don't need them, you don't have to use them, but they're there if they're required. And on Employee Center, you can click any of these to preview the record. So for example, if we wanted to preview this risk assessment, we can click that and it will open up in a modal and you can view it. And you can do that for all of these other items here as well. The work task is kind of open-ended, so permits are very typically associated with a work order. And what we've done is we've made this so that you can configure it to attach it to any different type of work task. So it could be maybe you want to use a work order in FSM, or maybe you want to attach it to a maintenance record in WSD, and that can be done from here. Here we have the location field. So at the moment, this is configured to use the WSD location model. And once you've chosen your location, we've also provided a text field so you can add a little bit more granularity. So this location model can be configured to go right down to the space level. But even if you needed a bit more detail than the space level and need to go much more granular than that, you could add those details here. So for example, maybe there's a duct above a door or something like that that might not be within your location model, you could type those details into this section here. Then we can put in the start and the end time, date and time for the permit. So maybe it's spanning a few days. And then we can put in a date and time for when any of the approvals need to be in. And then we can add multiple people to a watch list here as well if we feel like we need to. Um, this permit can be requested for one or more people. Um, and we can also add their shift details. So if you need to see what time their shift starts and what time their shift ends, you can also put that in here. At the moment, we've got one person added that we're requesting for. And then you can type in any details around the scope of work or whatever description you feel like you need, comments. And then this section down here is where we see the details for the work types that we chose right at the beginning. So they will appear once you choose those. So you can see all of the details we can fill in for hot works, and you can see all of the details that you can fill in for confined space entry. And if I choose to add another one, so let's say maybe there's some electrical work, it will also add the electrical work section as well. So you can have as many work types or as few work types as are required. So I won't fill any of these details for now. Uh, but I will hit the acknowledge checkbox. And this message here is also configurable. So in a few areas within permits to work, we do have acknowledgement messages. So this kind of acts as the equivalent of your signature on a written or paper permit to work. And you can configure this. So there is a UI message page where you can go into that list and you can choose what acknowledgement message you have on your permit request forms, your permit I think it's your permit approvals. And there's one other one that I've forgotten, but I'm pretty sure there's three different acknowledgement messages that you can configure for permits. And also we have attachments. So let's submit this one. And once it's submitted, you can see here that it gives us the message to say that it's been successfully submitted. And then you can keep an eye on the request here, and you can keep an eye and jump into Employee Center to review all of the details that you've submitted on that permit. So this is essentially the digital version of the permit that you're requesting. The work details will have all of the work information. I didn't fill in any of the fields there, but all of the information that you would enter into those fields that we saw on the previous screen, they would show up under each of these different headings. So these are your work details. We have an activity stream so you can share messages back and forth between yourself and the permit coordinator who will be working on this in Workspace. And if there are any checklists, so you may have pre-work checklists or closeout checklists that you need to complete, you can do them from here. They will also be assigned to the assignee as a task in Employee Center. So you can jump into Employee Center, find the task, and jump in to do your pre-work checklist, which is which will show up something like this. You can also do that on your phone. Um, Let me jump back. Doo, doo, doo. Oh, I can't jump back. So um, and yeah, you can do your checklist and then any attachments will show up here. Once this has been approved by the permit coordinator and they actually issue the permit, it will change the state up here. And also, if you need to print the permit, you can click print permit here. It will bring you to another page and it will give you the print preview of the permit in a format that basically fits well on a printed page like this. So you'll be able to click up here to click to print. Okay. So let's jump into the next persona is the person who's actually doing the permit coordination. So this person will be working out of the health and safety workspace. So they'll be looking at the risk management page in the workspace where they can see all of the different health and safety risk management capabilities. And we've just clicked into permit to work. I can see that there's two permits that are already there, but if I hit refresh, we should see the one that I just put in there. So it's the welding pipe work in Fab 14 trench. So when I jump in here, you'll be able to see all of the same fields as we saw. Let's get a bit more screen real estate. As we saw in the Employee Center side of things. So as the permit coordinator, I can jump in and I have access to all of these different fields. And then below, I can see the people that it was requested for. This could be a big team of people. It may be more than one person, but I can see their shift start and end as we saw in Employee Center. And I can see all of the work details here and the acknowledgement message. Um, there will be approvers required. So one thing that will happen is you may have an approver for different work types. So all of the different work types are configurable. So we've got hot works, we've got what do we have? Confined space, and I think I added electrical work. You can configure approvers for those different types of work. And they will show up here so you can keep an eye on the status. And those approvers will receive their approval requests through tasks in Employee Center. So they can jump in, they can click on the link to open up the permit, they can review all the information, they can review the checklists to ensure that the checklists have all been done, and then they can approve or reject the permit request. So we've provided a very, very basic approval workflow out of the box, but that can be configured to your needs because we understand that permit approval processes are not always exactly the same in every company, but that's okay because we have a very powerful workflow builder in Flow Designer where you can configure that. So we can also click in here to see the checklists. So we can see that they were assigned to Amy Malone and she hasn't actually done them yet, but she would need to do her closure checklist before closing it out. And she would also need to do her pre-work before she starts work on that permit. And then I skipped over it, but we do have actions, and the actions are the same. If you're familiar with any of the other health and safety applications, we do have the same health and safety actions capability here. So if the permit coordinator needs to create actions, they can just jump in here, they can click new, and they can start creating any corrective, preventive, or even learning actions and things like that from the actions tab. I think I've covered everything. So I'll hand it back to Claire. But if there's anything I've missed, Claire, just let me know and I can
Yeah, no, that was
cover it.
wonderful, Shayna. I will seal screen share and get us back into our slides. So Shayna just shared a demo of our permit to work process. We're now going to start getting a little bit more technical, and we're actually going to walk through some of our implementation considerations. If you have any questions about what you just saw, feel free to put them in the chat. That was a really great overview of permit to work, but obviously for each of your use cases, or as you're thinking about it through implementation, there might be some things that you want to configure, as Shayna called out, maybe those approval process or notifications. So that's things we can talk about as well. So as you're beginning your health and safety permit to work implementation journey, you're first going to want to start out by demoing or by downloading our risk management plugin. So this is our risk management plugin. Permit to work is a feature that's a part of it. If you go to the store, you'll be able to see this plugin and download it into your instance. The latest version, it needs to be at least 5.0, and that will have that permit to work feature in it. And it is compatible with Yokohama, Xanadu, and Washington. We are a store release, so we release 4 times a year, but for our customers, we will always be compatible with our family releases, just to make sure that you don't have to upgrade your entire instance to get this one feature. So we are compatible to those family releases. And there's no dependencies, although you do need to have incident management downloaded in your instance for some of that core information, but we'll walk through a little bit more about that as well. Out of the box, we do provide roles to our permit to work. So we have a permit coordinator role. We have quite a bit of roles that are available. These can all be found on our docs page or our blog post on permit to work found on our community page. We're not going to go in depth on them, but these roles are a good start to get started with health and safety, but you can reconfigure them or create new roles to meet your needs. Again, depending on the complexity of your permit to work process, you might need to make adjustments to them or reconfigure. This is our data model for permit to work. I like to show the data model for those that are a little bit more familiar with health and safety or with ServiceNow. It gives a good understanding of how we've built actually permit to work, how it's working with other applications, and the table names as well. So I'm not going to go through this super in depth, but as you come back and look at this, the data model is good to understand if you are making any configurations or customizations. As you go through your permit to work journey, we do have a recommendation in how to implement health and safety. You can make changes to it. You can start with permit to work if you'd like, but some of this information is conditional on having things downloaded. So first, we recommend in your implementation journey to start with core information or foundational information like location data, core data, so roles, people in your sys user table, groups. We also recommend having your health and safety profile table updated. So that is going to be pulling from your sys user table. All of our applications or our features here will reference that health and safety profile table. So we do recommend you having your users or your employees in that profile. The profile, what it does essentially is creates an electronic record from a health and safety perspective of that user. So you can collect their information on it, any records that they're associated with. So you'd be able to see, incidents they've been involved in, permit to work requests that they've requested, maybe, audits that they've been a part of. So it really gives full visibility of that employee and the interactions that they've had within health and safety. Additionally, you can track documents about that employee. So if you needed to house certifications or medical documents or anything that is relevant to that employee from a health and safety perspective, that would all be found on their health and safety profile. So we do recommend getting that set up to start. And then also we have some other foundational information that's really key to risk management and our risk management plugin. And those are our controls and hazards tables. Controls being any type of safety measures, hazards being any type of risk. So for an example, a hazard could be the potential of, fall risks, and the controls could be PPE, which would be like slip resistant shoes, for example. So these are pretty foundational because once you set up your controls and hazards, anything within risk management, so things like JSAs or risk assessments, will utilize those and reference those fields. So you should start there and then begin phase two, which is really any of these features here. So you don't need to download or use all of these features. It's depending on your business requirements. But as we're going through here, if you wanted to start using inspections, risk assessments, maybe the safety register and JSA, and really this is looking at an audits is our risk management plugin, and then these here are our incident management plugin. You have flexibility to implement each of those features. And then we have phase three. And the reason I put phase three over here is these will be dependent on information that is input in here. So permit to work does reference inspections, risk assessments, safety register, and JSA. So if you have nothing within these tables, you're not using it, their permit to work just won't reference that information. Same thing for exposure management, as well as Now Assist for health and safety. If you're not using incident management currently for the incident summarization capability, there will be nothing for Now Assist to summarize. So this is just a recommendation for how you do that journey, but it is very flexible. And if that you just want to start with incident management to start, you absolutely can. You just need to fill out some of that foundational data first. Some more information on foundational data before you begin or as you begin your implementation. It is important to compile this data. So things like your users, your health and safety profiles, and locations. These are going to be shared across other applications with the instance. So you might already, if you're a current ServiceNow customer and using it in other applications, you might already have your users and your locations set up. But as you go through your implementation, just verify that you want those users in your health and safety profile and that all locations are relevant to the health and safety application. So just review them prior to beginning that health and safety implementation. We have some more information on locations here. So locations are a crucial part of health and safety. The reason being is locations determine where the incident, where risk assessments, where permit to work is occurring. And from our product perspective, we use the WSD location hierarchy. The reason being, we want our customers to be very granular with reporting of where these activities are taking place. So you can have it at a high level of a region, maybe AMS, all the way down to a spacer room, maybe like room 2, for example. So that's going to enable a lot more granularity in the reporting from a location standpoint. And we do have a note here that locations are defined via the class field on that CNM location record. So if you're not using WSD locations, you can remove that reference qualifier, but it is recommended to have another qualifier in place to improve performance, just to help with that search capability. Next, we have our health and safety profile. Like I said, this is a dedicated profile to access all safety information about that user. It's going to display any of those related safety records. And the users actually can be employees, contractors, or visitors. So we can maintain information about employees, any external users such as contractors or visitors. Note these types of employees would not be logging into ServiceNow and accessing health and safety, but from a records keeping standpoint, if you need to maintain information about them, you can. And the suggestion is to add those users because health and safety will reference them from a user standpoint. And any additional attributes on the profile can be configured if you want to add additional information on the health and safety profile. We have our hazards and controls here. Like I said, this is a very foundational part of the data within health and safety risk management. It's required for conducting risk assessments. You'll see it throughout the application. So it's in these two tables here. And if you are new to health and safety and curious to know more about how to implement hazards and controls, risk assessments, we actually have a boot camp on Now Learning that our team put on last year. So you can actually watch the recording of that, and there is an accreditation associated with it. And you'll be able to learn a little bit more about how to implement hazards and controls and what's the recommended approach to doing that. And then when you're implementing risk management, some additional considerations here are that permit to work, as Shana showed, is going to reference on that request inspections, job safety analysis, risk assessments, and the safety register. So as that worker is adding information to their permit to work request, they're going to be selecting from those reference fields. So just something to note, if you're not using that feature or that capability, then you might need to determine how you would actually associate those safety measures. For example, if you're a customer using inspections on a paper-based process, you might need to attach the inspection, upload it and attach it to that permit to work request instead of using that reference field. There's some flexibility there, but we do recommend using our whole risk management application. So you would need to start with those implementations before using permit to work, or we can talk about solutions for another way to bring those safety measures onto the permit work request. Again, for more information about how to implement risk management, we do have that boot camp. So that will cover inspections, job safety analysis, risk assessments, and safety registers if you want to learn more about that. All right, we're now going to get into common configurations. So permit types, permit checklists, health and safety properties, and then I have a note here for notifications and approvals. And these are going to be the most common configurations that you'll do during your implementation. So the first is configuring permit types. So like I said, out of the box, there are 8 permit types. However, customers can configure permit types as required. So depending on your industry, where you're at in the world, you might want to add different permit types. And these are the steps here. We're going to post these slides, so if you want to come back and look, but I feel like it will be most helpful if we look in an instance. And so we're actually going to be logging into my instance here. I'm going to be logged in as an admin. And we're first going to navigate to our record producers. And we're going to open record producers. And to configure the permit type, we'll first go to the permit type record producer. Let me just select permit. And we'll go to our request a permit to work record producer. So within our request a permit to work record producer, we'll open that up. And you'll see all of the information on this record producer. So this is what's being surfaced up to the employee within Employee Center. And how we built our record producer for permit to work is with variable sets. So each of our permit types are going to be a variable set. So when Shana, during his demo, clicked hot work as the permit type, conditional fields appeared, and that's because we built them in variable sets here. So we'll look at our hot work details. To add and configure a new permit type, you would actually add a new variable set here. And so we'll just click into one and you'll see what it looks like. But what you would do is add a new variable set, and for each variable set, add the variables, which are going to be the corresponding questions or information that you'd like to fill out during the permit to work request. So we have the name here, you have the type, so it could be select box, reference, multi-line text, and you can configure the ones that we provide out of the box. So maybe, for example, we have ventilation be a multi-line text and you just want it to be a single line text. For example, you can configure those. And then the question is going to be that question. And so you can add new questions to each of the variable types, or add a new variable set as a whole. So lots of flexibility here, but I did want to call out how we built it, which is with these variable sets. Now, after you build your variable set, what you need to do is then go to system definition and our tables. And let me actually type in the name. It'll be quicker. For our decision tables. And we have our decision tables here. So again, as we type in permit, we'll see permit type configuration and permit checklist configuration. So just make sure when you type in permit, if you're going quick, to make sure that it's the permit type if you're adding a new permit type. If you've added a new permit checklist, which we'll cover next, you need to go to the permit checklist one. So it's going to open within Workflow Studio. So you'll know you're in the right place when you're looking at Workflow Studio. And this is a published one, so this is active right now for all of our permit types. If you had added a new variable set or a new permit type, you would actually see it here. And then we'll create the draft. And you would associate the new variable set to that new permit type. So even now, we can edit this too. So if you wanted to associate the variable set to a new permit type, you can. Just wanted to showcase that there is that next step to link those to the permit type and their variable set together. So we'll go back to our slides here. Just a helpful tip. This is going through pretty quickly, but I think it's always valuable to see it in a demo. So as you're walking through, it just gives a better understanding of what you're looking at. But do refer to our docs for additional steps. They're very, very detailed. And so they'll walk you through the entire step-by-step process. So in case I missed any steps, refer to those docs. So the next thing is our permit checklist. So when a permit request has been submitted, the permit checklist will get assigned to the employees or any of the people that are on that permit request. So if you have 10 employees that have been added, they will all get their own permit checklist. So we have our pre-work and our closure checklist. The goal of that is to make sure that all safety measures have been accounted for before the work begins and as well as after. And we provide 3 checklist types out of the box. And they're really meant to just be guidelines to customers. We understand that every customer is going to have their own unique requirements with these checklists. But as you're starting, it helps to see an example of one. So that's the 3 that we have there. They're going to be automatically assigned after that user submits the permit to work request. So they will appear within Employee Center. And you add them the same way that you would the permit types. However, you need to make sure, and the catch here is that, we'll go back into our instance. The catch here is that you need to make sure that you're doing it for the permit checklist and not the permit type. We'll go to record producer. We'll then go to our permit checklist. And you'll see here it's our permit checklist. And they are record producers, but they're conditional on that permit to work checklist being permit to work request being submitted. You'll see our variable sets here. So again, you can add new, and we'll just click into one of these so you can see that there are a bunch of questions that appear, variables that appear that are part of that variable set. Again, you'll need to go to table definitions after you've created one of those. To link those two together, or decision tables. You'll need to go, you'll need to go to decision tables to link those together, making sure that you do it within permit checklist configurations. We'll just open that so you can see what that looks like. We're going pretty quick, but if you have any questions on this, we're monitoring the chat here. So you'll see now we have the variable set, the checklist type, as well as the permit type. So you have to make sure that you first add your permit types if you're adding new permit types, and then you add your checklist types. Otherwise, this will be blank. And when you select Hotworks, nothing will come up if you haven't done your decision table. So now we see our permit type as well as our permit checklist decision tables. All right. So the next thing that I want to call out as things to consider during our health and safety permit to work implementation are our properties table. So what I'll actually do is show you what I mean by this. And Shayna called it out during his demo, but go back here and showcase what we're going to look at. So we'll go back to our permit request actually. And this is again our employee center where the employee or the manager would be submitting that permit to work request. And if we request a permit to work, and I'll open this up, what you'll see here is this work task field. So this is going to reference any task type that is within ServiceNow. So as long as it's an extension of task, it could be task, but if you put task in here, it might get a little bit out of hand if you're using multiple ServiceNow products. And so we do recommend using a specific task type. So right now in here, we actually have health and safety actions being referenced. You could add workplace service delivery cases in here. You could add FSM work orders here. And so as they're filling out this permit to work, they can say, this is where I was assigned the work, and it will reference out those work tasks. So as we go back in here, how you do that is within our health and safety properties. And so we go to our administration and our properties. From a general health and safety overview standpoint, we put a lot of our configuration properties within this properties area. So if you're wanting to add more, always check here too, because it's an easy way to do some configurations. And we are in the risk management scope. So you have to make sure you're in the correct scope in order to add this. And you can add the table name. So whatever the table name that you of the task type that you'd like to add, whether it be again case, work orders. If you wanted to add any other task type in here, you could, and that is going to tell that specific field what to reference. So very excited about this for our customers that are using our other ServiceNow products to assign work, and you'll be able to see that within there. So that is our last property that I wanted to call out here. So again, it's going to be under that work task table. These are some examples, but you're not limited. As long as it's a ServiceNow task type, you can add it in that field. And then that is everything we have for our webinar today. So we have about 7 minutes to answer any questions that anyone might have. I see that there are some things in the chat. I see Shayna giving a note there. So we'll take any questions from our group here on our permit to work implementation flow.